Robby Adamson, and we're going to be doing solving puzzles with Robby again. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I posted now 3 videos on the Benko. One with solving puzzles from yesterday, in which I explained the process, and we're going to do the thinking process, and that's the exact same thing we're going to do today. And then I also posted one on puzzle battle with some light commentary, and then I also did a stream for the Southern Arizona Chess Association in which I annotated the game or gave comments while I was playing the Blitz tournament. And so hopefully you guys will check all that stuff out. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, tell everyone, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So what we're going to start with today is we're going to solve some tactics. We're not going to do puzzle rush per se. We're just going to solve puzzles so we can kind of go over this, and we're going to start. Okay, so this is my high rating right now. So again, what's the first thing we learned in the last puzzle analysis? We looked at assessing the position. So we got to start with looking at the material. We have 7 pawns each. It looks like we have 4 minor pieces each, so the materially this is equal. So do we notice anything funny about the position? Well, first of all, black just played knight f4, which hits my queen. So that is something you have to be concerned about. The second thing I notice in the position is that the knight is very badly placed on a5. I also notice that the rook could potentially be a target on the diagonal here. You see this. And then we also have queen b5 as a check idea, which would obviously save the queen, but also threaten to take this bishop on b4. So we have to check this out here. What are the candidate moves? Queen b5 check is obviously the first move you have to look at. Knight takes g6 is another move to consider, only because even though it doesn't defend the queen, it allows me to take the queen, and then the rook is hanging. That doesn't feel right yet. So I'm gonna bet that queen b5 check is the move. But let's go ahead and do some analysis to make sure we're not just guessing. One thing is, once the queen moves off of the e file, this is pinned, so the knight is not going to be useful and can't really get a discovery. So what I'm looking at here is if we played queen b5 check, let's clear that. So if we play queen b5 check, if he blocks with the pawn, for example, we could take here, we could take the bishop for free, which will win a piece. If he then took our piece on e5, then we would have queen takes queen, king takes, and then bishop takes to e5, which would fork the knight and the rook. So that looks very promising, but we have to make sure, because my rating's pretty high up there, and I want to make sure that we're not being too quick to judge. On queen b5 check, if they play bishop to d7, I think we can just get away with queen takes, knight takes, and then we have a discovery on the rook again, so we're up a piece. So to me, that looks like the right answer. So let's go ahead and play it. I'm confident playing it. All right, so we got the first move correct. All right, so he didn't block with the pawn or anything, but I think taking here leads to a similar answer. Ooh, c5. Well, I did not anticipate that. I can take en passant. If I take on a5, he can take the bishop on d4, and this is still a pin. So we got to find something better. We got to find make sure we can win this. If bishop takes c5, which looks inviting, because if pawn takes, I have queen takes f4. The problem is that he can take on e5 check first. So I'm going to bet that dc is the winning move here. So we're going to go ahead and play it. Oh, and I was wrong. I missed 4, which means that I didn't get it completely wrong, which is why the chess.com gave me a break. So let's say before we go on to the next one, let's see if there was something that we missed, and maybe I stopped too quickly. Aha, I did stop too quickly. That's my bad. I should have taken on, I can now see the answer. If bishop takes c5, if queen e5 check, I have bishop back to e3. And you say, well, what's the big deal? Well, the knight's hanging, and so is the knight on a5. We can't defend both. So I bet you that's the move. Yep. And we would have gotten it right. Okay, so that was, as my coach always tells me, extend the analysis. Make sure you keep looking and looking, and don't just stop just because you see a check and you think it's over. Because if I had extended that analysis, I would have seen that I could have moved the bishop back to e3, and then that would have been the end. So that's a lesson of stopping too quickly. So let's go to the next one. All right, let's do an assessment of this position. So this is an endgame, clearly. White has 3 pawns for the 1 pawn, but he's down the exchange. So materially, it is equal, with an imbalance. Of course, one thing I notice is that the king has no legal moves. Okay, so the first move that comes to mind is anything that gets the bishop on this diagonal here. Anything we can do to do that. Queen takes e5 doesn't look right because it gives black the ability to free his queen by taking on b4, hitting this guy, maybe have some checks. White's king is a little bit vulnerable there. No bishop move works because if the rook wasn't guarding d7, I think this would be just a winner. But the problem is there's a rook here, and there's no good discovery because he can either block with the queen or he can slide the rook over. So that's not good. So I think the candidate move that makes sense here is either bishop c4, which threatens d6, okay, or, as I often tell my students, if the first move doesn't quite work, what you're supposed to do is change the move order. So the first move would have been bishop c4, but then I was a little worried about him possibly taking on b4. We still have to analyze that, as we saw in the last puzzle. Or you can play the second move first. You could play d6 first, which prevents the queen from getting out to b4. And if queen takes d6, we have to analyze bishop c4 check, which wins because, let's see if you can find it. The answer would be on bishop c4, king f8, and then queen h8 check picks up the rook, because now we are guarding the g8 square by the queen that's here, that's hitting that square, and this bishop hitting this. Okay, so that looks like a winner, but let's just check it because we messed up the last one. So d6, what does that threaten? It threatens to play bishop c4 check. If he plays rook to h7, we can check again on c4 and then take on e5, and that wins 3 pawns, and that should be good enough to win. So let's check it out. Just for the heck of it, though, let's check out bishop c4. If they take on b4 with the queen, d6 check doesn't work because we can take this guy. But don't stop the analysis yet, because on bishop c4, queen takes b4. If we play d6, we don't have to play d6. We can play queen e8 check first. And now, if king h7, then we have bishop d3 check. But aha, in that position we have e4, in which the queen's defending. So I feel pretty comfortable that d6 is the move, but I felt comfortable on the last one too. So let's take a look. Okay, good, we got that one. And now we can trade queens. Oh yes, so see if you can, well, let's see, actually we got to make sure we're not messing up here. So if I trade queens, he has to take with the king. If he takes with the rook, I pin him with bishop c4, and then I win. If he takes with the king, d7 allows the king to go back. If I check him, he goes king e7. That's not so good. So I wonder what the crusher is here. Bishop c4 right away doesn't look good because he can just simply take it, given the pin. So, a little harder than I thought. But queen f7 is a good anticipatory defense move. So let's see if we can find something here. Can I play d7? Queen takes queen. Queen. King h7. Oh, wow. And then bishop d3. Wow, that wins. That is a sexy move. All right, let's try it. Oh, and we found it. We were correct. Yep. All right, so that's actually a very instructive endgame or position to analyze. So don't think that it's automatically what you need to do here. So let's take a look here. We're going to do it on an analysis board. So the first move by black was taking. That's the position we started with. We all correctly found d6. So one thing I want you to remember, and this applies to any good player, is if you see a combination that doesn't work, try reversing the move order if you can, and sometimes that's playing the second move first and the first move second in your calculation, and sometimes it might be the third move first. Or you could play the first move first and then play the third move, then the second. You have to try all different combinations to see if it works. Because against Queen f7, these chess.com doesn't give these puzzles unless there's only just one answer, or at least they try to. So here we can see that queen takes is not good, because now I already said earlier, if rook takes, bishop c4 wins. But unfortunately, the king is here, and now if d7, the king walks over. Again, I had initially thought after d7 they could play rook g8, but again, we have the same trick. So that doesn't work. So we got to go a little deeper in the position, and you got to find a forcing move. So on d7, now the computer just plays probably what's in an engine as to what the best move is. But again, from a practical standpoint, queen takes queen is the move that most people would play in a tournament game. So we queen. Black has no move except for moving the king to h7. And now we have bishop d3. Notice that with the queen here, there is no e4 idea. Remember when the queen was on b4 in that one line, it defended this pawn. But here that doesn't exist. Okay, and now if king h6, which just definitely loses by force, queen f6 is winning, but this is even juicier, because now if here takes, king h4, and real quick, see if you can find the mate in 2 for white. Pause the video, and the answer would be g3, and then the ever gorgeous bishop f1. And we have a checkmate. Okay, so that's not good. So hopefully that was helpful in explaining that little thinking process. Oh, I think there is one more move we got to check out. So here, bishop d3. If rook g6, unfortunately this requires a little bit more technique in order to win this. I mean, clearly taking white's up a pawn, but it is a queen ending. So we're going to have to try to find something a little bit better. I'll bet you that, see if you can find the forced win here. Let's see if we have it. Candidate moves are queen d6, because that threatens to liquidate everything, and then white has a passed pawn that is way too far away, given that white has 2 of them. But if queen d6, they might have queen d1 check. I can't block with the bishop, so I have to go to h2, and then he's going to come back and check me and have a perpetual. So that would be a little bit sloppy way to end this. So is there anything else we can try? I would guess there's something. So we could mess around with queen e7, check. If the king goes to if the king goes to either of these squares, then we've got queen e8 check and picking this guy up. So king h6 is forced. And now let's see if we can figure out, is there any extra little intermezzo? We could take the rook, queen takes, and if we take on e5, unfortunately he has queen b1 check and picking that up, and that's not going to be enough to win. So it requires a little bit more technique here. So we could try queen f8, but then he has king g5. Let's see if that helps at all. If we checked here, the king goes to g5, and now does it change anything if we take here? I don't think so. It says I have a big advantage here, but I'm not finding the clincher. If queen e7, okay, so king g4 loses to bishop e2, and king f4 loses to queen f7, so he has this again. So you know what it may be? It may be that we just got to take this guy. He's got to take with the queen. Oh, doesn't like that. Still thinks I messed up. And then, do I have another way to play this? I mean, I guess objectively it's winning, but not too in love with this. I mean, maybe we just have to guard. We have to guard the diagonal. Do something like this. Guard these diagonals here. But in any event, it's probably a queen ending. Chess.com has an engine that goes through this. Okay, so what we're going to go on is we're going to go on to the next one. We're going to go. I didn't really want to save that. That's not what I intended to do. Okay. So we'll do the, we're going to do, okay, so we're going to go to the next puzzle here. It's okay. There's probably a faster button I can do. Okay, so here we have a new one. So we're 1 for 2 on the day. So what's going on here? All right. So in this position, white is up the exchange, it looks like. Black has a lot of pieces over here. They look a little disjointed in some ways because it's hard to move. This bishop is in effect blockaded by this bishop. So the first thing I see is that if bishop takes, black really wants to try this at some point and win the queen. So we'd have to analyze that and see if that really is in fact a problem. It probably is. That pin would be a little bit of a disaster if I had to play knight to d5. Might be a little scary. So, okay. So what are the candidate moves here? I could take with the queen. Knight takes, bishop takes. That doesn't solve anything. So queen takes we're going to eliminate pretty quickly. So the only other candidate moves we have is king g2. And remember how I said earlier that the knights look out of sorts? Well, it's because they are. This knight can't move without this guy hanging, and this knight can't move without this guy hanging. So the knights are married to each other. So let's see if we can take advantage of that. But I do want to analyze the most obvious move, which is bishop takes f2. If knight takes, queen takes, d4 check, we just have king h2, and black's just simply down a rook for nothing. So after bishop takes f2, it's going to have to be d4 if there's anything. And then if knight to d5, we could play, maybe just rook d8's a problem. Yeah, that's actually a major problem. So king g2 has to be the move. Oh, rook e3. All right. So here, now we really got to find the right move here, because now what they're hoping for, and again we have to calculate to see if it works, is if bishop takes e3, then d4. But now at least we're taking a rook, which is a big difference. If I take the rook with the queen, then knight takes, and then maybe king takes, but that doesn't look right because of knight c2. So that's going to be bad. So the question is does white have to take the rook? I mean, the queen is in effect trapped. So I think we got to take this guy, And then what's different about the position earlier is on taking d4, and then, I'm sorry, taking on e3, and then if d4, we have knight to d5. And you got to be on your toes, because it's easy to miss this kind of thing. Is if bishop takes d4, knight d5. If they trade and take here, and I take back, thinking they're going to be able to play knight e3 and win the queen, they'll be sorely regretful, because when I take here with d5, it is with check. So I think we got to take this guy. And then we got to save our queen here. I don't see another way to do it. I think knight d5. Oh, and I messed up. So where did we screw up? Let's see if we can figure it out without cheating. Maybe it wants us just to take all the pieces. It is up. We are up a piece if we just take on f2 with the knight, with the bishop. Yeah. All right. So again, didn't go far enough in the analysis. Let's see actually what was wrong with our answer, because I think that's against this move. Oh, we got to analyze it first, don't we? All right. So if knight d5, oh, So if knight takes e3, can't we just take on f2 with the king? And if bishop takes d5, queen f4, what's wrong with that? You know what it is? I'll bet you it's queen d8 here. Again, dealing with that pin that we were so unhappy with. Let's check it out and see. Let's check it out. And we were right. It is queen d8. Yeah, knight d5 gave us a double question mark. So yeah, so we were correct on second looking at it. So okay. So let's do, so to show the okay, so we'll do the next one. Oops, don't want to play live chess. All right, so let's try this one. Training. All right, so again, we got to assess the position. First thing we look at is what? We got to look at the fact that that white is down a piece here, but is not, as should be very obvious. We got everything undeveloped, and we got a queen that's the only thing that's saving him in this position. Candidate moves for white. What are they? The first things that jump off the page at me are queen takes b7, RAE1, which threatens checkmate, rook takes f7, king takes, rook f1 check, queen goes back to f6, takes, and if I take on b7, he's got knight d7 holding. So rook f7 is definitely the move I would want to play. It's the first move that jumped off the screen at me. If RAE1, how does he stop mate there? Ooh, just knight c6. That would be embarrassing. So, queen takes b7. So let's look at all these. So if queen takes b7, how does he defend the rook? If he brings his queen back to c6, we just simply have, or do we simply have, queen c8, then queen c8, then queen e8. Can we take on f7? King takes, rook f1 check, king g6. That's not going to win. All All right, so this might require a little bit more of a finesse type of idea, but let's see. Sometimes you got to look for maybe queen takes, or queen f5, maybe, or queen d5, going for a checkmate, just giving him a little more tickle. So, for example, queen d5 threatens checkmate on here, and it also threatens to win a rook. That prevents the knight from coming out to either to c6 or to d7, so we're just going to simply win there. Queen there, no king move is going to survive, no rook move is going to survive, no pawn move is going to survive. So what are we left with? We're left with... Oh, and you know what's really nice about queen d5? It stops checks on c5, which could be useful. So we're going to take a stab and find out. Let's see. So this is one of those quiet moves. So let's just give it one more look. If queen d5, how does he stop checkmate? He could play f6. Well, that's a defense. Does that help if we take on b7 now? If he plays queen c6, queen c8, he's still got queen e8, doesn't he? So if queen d5, if he plays f6, oh no, what am I thinking? I'm not thinking, because I already said queen d8 was good. So yeah, and that's what happens when you start analyzing. You sometimes, or at least it definitely happens to me, is you get yourself thinking on one train of thought, and you forget to take a step back and look at the position. And that's something I always tell my students to do. Always take a step back, look at the position, and say, okay, what's really going on here? Okay, so I think queen d5 is just game over. Yep, and there, and there. So see how easy that was? I only got 1 point because it took me 3 minutes and 47 seconds. But interesting that in a position like this, it's hard to find a move like queen d5 because it is so quiet. Everyone wants to go for the brilliancy prize. Taking here is obviously so juicy. It looks like it threatens the rook. It looks like it threatens queen c8 check, winning this rook. But unfortunately, black has queen c6, and he can block those checks, which is why that didn't work. RAE1, oops. So in this position, RAE1, oops. RAE1 in this position just simply allows knight to c6, and there's no sack. If queen e6 check, which looks like it almost works, f6 stops all that from happening. So the answer again is queen here, queen there, and it's so simple when you look at it. You say, oh, you just play queen d5 and win a rook. But it takes time to get to that point in your analysis. All right, so let's try another one. All right, so again, we are assessing this position. What do we got here? We got we got 7 pawns for white. We got 4 pawns for black. So black is down 3 pawns. The material, the minor pieces are equal. White's king is obviously very, very loose. But what's the other side that we see? We see this. We see pressure here. We got pressure here. Okay, all sorts of juicy things that are in the position. So the first move, and if someone says they didn't think this was the first move they'd play, they're lying. Knight h2 has to be the first move that we at least analyze. White can't take because it's mate. Could white do? Could black? Does white have another option? Given the fact that white is up so many pawns, knight takes h2, knight h4. Just simply winning the rook may not be pleasing enough for you. What other moves we got here? You know, another move that jumped off the page at me is knight takes e5. That would be nd takes e5, and see if that helps. Knight takes e5, de, and then knight takes e5 again, which again threatens to take the knight and win the queen or go for mate. So that looks somewhat promising, although he could just play king g2, so I'm not so sure that's so good. What other moves are on the table here? Rook g8 is possible. It's a nice little quiet move to try to get rid of the queen, but I'm not sure what the answer is here. So let's do a little bit of analysis. Do we see anything else here? Oh, and of course, queen takes h2 you got to look at too, but clearly that doesn't work either. So we've that's run its course. Anything else? So if knight h2, because it looks the most juicy, knight h4 almost looks forced, actually. Okay, so what did I miss? Something really stupid. If knight takes h2, I'll pause the video. If knight takes h2, knight h4, what's the winning move for black? The obvious, just knight f3 check. It forks the king and the queen. If white takes the knight with the knight, then queen h1 is mate. So this looks like a winner. I think we can try this. Queen f6. Okay, Reggie. So let's. I mean, it's got to be takes, right? Unless it's queen h3. That would be so dirty if queen h3 was the move. Like beyond dirty. I mean, taking the knight for check with check looks really good. What am I worried about with knight takes f3? If knight takes f3, king g2. If I check on h3 or h2, he can take the knight on f3. So if I'm going to try this, I'd probably have to try queen h2, king f3, king takes f3, queen h5 check. But he could just simply go back, or king e3. So are we going for something more brilliant here? Or do we just have to take our pieces and go home? The birds are chirping outside. It's 12:30 on a Sunday. Queen h3 does look pretty good. Maybe I just have to do it and just trust the position, trust my analysis. All right, we're going to go for it. Oh, and I missed it. Okay, so what should I have done? Is it takes? Yeah, it's takes. Of course it is. Oh, oh, that's not even fair. Is it rook f8? No. Trapping the queen. Because of rook h1 or something? Where's the queen going? Alright. So, is it this? No. Alright, I give up. What's the answer? Oh, come on. Alright, so that move actually makes a ton of sense, even though I hate not getting these right when this happens. One of the things I was worried about is that the rook could go to h1 in these lines. And it really, because white's up so many pawns, and it's not like these pieces are doing much. They're sort of defensive. So knight h2 is actually a very brilliant move because it stops rook h1. Because if rook h1, see if you can find it real quick. Pause it. You should be able to find this pretty fast. It's just simply queen h3, check, king g1, and knight f3 is mate. And he doesn't have a defense. So, yeah, knight h2. That's one of those moves. And one of the hard parts of playing knight h2 is your knight was already there 2 moves ago. So for you to have taken on h2, check on f3, and then go back to h2 is sort of an illusion of sorts, and so it's easy to miss something like that. All right, we're going to do one more. All right, so here we have an endgame. So yes, so this is pretty quick to assess as far as the material goes. And what's going on here is that we have an even position materially. White's king is much more advanced. and is supporting the d pawn from queening, I'll bet you I can already, well, I hate to prejudge these positions, but d6 already looks wrong to me, just because I think the king can go to h4, and if d7, rook to a8, and king e6 is going to take so long to queen that black's going to be able to play g3 and move his king down here. So my instincts tell me to play king f5 here. And why do my instincts say that? Number one, you're threatening rook h1 checkmate. Number two, if they play rook h or king h4, I take the g pawn with check, and the king is cut off, and it'll never stop the pawn because it'll basically be a rook, a king, and a pawn each. And then if king h6, we still take, and the king is cut off. So I'm going to bet that this is the right move. Okay, and so good defensive idea. So now if I play rook h1, he's got rook h3, and so I can't take because I will lose that race because he actually queens first. So I'm going to guess the best move here is rook takes g4, and then what he's trying to try is rook d3. Isn't that really clever? So I'd have to play rook g5 check, king moves, and then king f6, I guess. Okay. I frankly don't see another way to win this position, so I think we got to do it. Yeah, so he plays his rook d3. What's annoying is I can't move my king over because he'll sack even if I play king e4, which is what I was originally thinking, because then if he takes, I take here and it's winning. Unfortunately, on king e4, because my rook's not defended, he can go ahead and eliminate this pawn first. So, yikes. So I think that rook g5 check is the move, but let's see if we have another anything else. I think this has to be right though. Yeah, rook g5, and we were able to win this one. So, okay, so hopefully that was helpful to you. Just to complete this, by the way, just so you're not left hanging. If in this position, if king f5, rook a3, rook takes g4, if rook d3, rook g5 check. Now king h4 is going to put the king in a really bad square that will never be able to help to stop the pawn. So king g6 or king h6 is the only other move here. And then the question is, how do we continue this one? So any king move loses, or not loses. No, it does not lose. I think king f6 here actually would be pretty good. Because what does that do? It defends this pawn, and then if rook f3 check, we can now block the check. And the king, the rook, and the pawn are going to be more than enough to beat this lone rook. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful to everybody. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and thanks everybody for all the support. It means a lot to get those subscribers and to get people asking questions, and it shows you're really, really interested, and to get us through a very tough time that's going around with the coronavirus. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'm out of here.